So in 2014, you become the co-host of Rogers Hometown Hockey. Man, what an opportunity. How did that present itself?
So I was at Breakfast Television in Calgary. City TV, which is the station that had breakfast television, was owned by Rogers. Rogers also owned Sportsnet. So I had already created a relationship with Sportsnet and was doing some smaller jobs for them there with the intention of moving into sports full time if the right opportunity arose. And I remember being at the breakfast television desk and getting a press release that said Rogers secured the NHL rights for the next 12 years. And here's this show it was like a very, scant, sparse description. But there's a show called Rogers Hometown Hockey. Ron MacLean will host. It will tour Canada telling local hockey stories. And so I immediately threw my hat into the ring. I sent a letter to the president of Sportsnet at the time, Scott Moore, asked him to consider me. He said, well, I think it's a great idea, but let me talk to, the executive producer and blah, blah, blah. So it was several months back and forth. And then they're like, yes, join us. So the first season, I did half the shows. I was still on breakfast television. I was more of a reporter. And then the second season, they offered it to me full time.
So there's been some kind words sent in from these incredible world-class musicians. But this next quote is going to be the quote of all quotes, because this is from my dad. So bear with me here, because on Tuesday night, I went to a concert, brought my dad. And while we're driving there, I just said, hey, do you know Tara Slone? He's a big hockey fan, right? So, hey, I assumed he didn't know Joy Drop because he's like into classic rock. But I said, hey, do you know Tara Slone? And here's what he said. He said, of course I know her. They'd send her to whatever town was being featured in the hockey broadcast, and she'd always be beaming with enthusiasm and positivity. Very articulate, a real joy. So the quote of all quotes from Dennis
Oh,
Martin. There you go.
yay. That's so nice.
So I thought you'd get a kick out of that more than anything. And we have a fan question from Stephanie Myers. Her question is, how was it working with a Canadian icon like Ron MacLean? I feel like that alone would, when
Yeah.
you see this, the opportunity, just no matter what it is, if it says Ron MacLean, it's like, wow, okay, that's a life changer.
Yeah, I mean, there's no simple answer. I mean, Ron is an icon for a reason. There is nobody, I just don't think there's anybody better than him. There's nobody who's more naturally gifted. He's just a master orator. He just he never stumbles. He can go on crazy tangents, and we all know that he does, but he always ties things up in a bow at the end. He's just so good. So at the beginning for me, it was intimidating because like I've had big time imposter syndrome and what am I doing here? But I will tell you that he is a very generous broadcaster. He is not proprietary about anything like, oh, I'm going to say this because this is my information. He his intention is always to do justice to the story and do justice to the community. He had more faith in me, I think, than I did. There's a certain level of precision that he demands, and I think sometimes for people, producers, me, like that can be hard. But generally, I mean, we were so invested in that show, and it's not just him; it's everybody involved in that broadcast. It was such a unique experience and such a unique group of people. I don't know if I'll ever work with a more tightly knit and caring group. Everybody wanted to make the communities proud. So yeah, but Ron, I mean, he is who he is for very good reason.
That's one of the great qualities of a leader is they believe in you before you believe in yourself, and they believe in you long enough that you can then believe in yourself because they did.
Yeah. Yep. He never had a doubt.
So, you recently had an introspective post about turning 50, and I saw
Mhm.
that around that time you had this birthday party at a venue. You played some Joy Drop songs. Tony was there playing, and Ron MacLean was there as well. What did it mean to you to have Ron MacLean come out to your birthday party and show support? Not a lot of people can have a birthday party and Ron MacLean's there.
Yeah, it was nice. I mean, I mean, Ron would always come if he was able to. So, I was just glad that he wasn't, somewhere in Canada, being asked to speak somewhere. So, yeah, he's been a really good friend. He's been a big fan of Joy Drop, and in fact, we performed on Hometown Hockey. That was, I think, before we even did a full live show. We did a we did an episode in Guelph, Ontario. So, and that was at his behest, really. There's no part of me that was like, let me get my band back together and put it on our show. It was totally his idea.
So I'm 38. Can you think back to the last 12 years of your life? And is there any wisdom that you can share with me that I can better live my next 12 years? What am
Well,
I
I
what
mean,
am I doing wrong here, Tara? Like, what's the
I
secret to
don't know.
happiness? What is the meaning of life?
I really don't know. But I'll tell you that one thing that I wish I had been better at, and I'm still learning, is how to say no. And creating boundaries for myself. Really bad at that. And when you work on a show like breakfast television, where you're constantly generating ideas, when you work on a show like Hometown Hockey, where everybody's so inspired, I just was really bad at giving myself downtime and personal space. And, I think even carving space out for my family, I think I really became quite consumed. Um, so if I would say, part of what defined the last 12 years, like, yes, sure, my career was gangbusters. Um, but I didn't have a good balance. So I would say boundaries. Turn off your phone. Don't answer that text. Don't answer that email. Just really carve out the space for yourself and your loved ones.
Yeah, saying no is actually saying yes to the things that are most important to you, right? Having, a
Totally.
great opportunity present itself and you can actually do it because you said no to something else that was less important.
Yeah, I think I lived a lot of my life in fear of like, oh, if I say no, I'm a people pleaser, right? If I don't say yes, then they're not going to like me or they're not going to ask me next time or I'm not going to get this. Um, but it was always sort of something is sacrificed when that's the way you approach things.
And what was your favorite part of doing Rogers hometown hockey?
I mean, aside from the camaraderie, which was really unparalleled, um, I mean, I just feel like it was such a privilege being welcomed into all of these communities and people would share their stories and their lives with us. It kind of got to a point where like, we were telling some really difficult stories sometimes. Stories about residential schools and stories about sickness and death and like a lot of um, we were sort of part of healing for people in some way. And that's no small responsibility. And I just think like how fortunate were we to have been given this vehicle and this platform to have people trust us with their stories. It was really remarkable.
So the show came to an end last year. Did that catch you off guard? Did it have to do with the pandemic and the lockdowns? Like you couldn't actually get to these cities and interact with people?
Yeah, I mean, that was part of it. I think that was the proverbial nail in the coffin. We were taken off the road like everybody else in March of 2020. The next year, we weren't on the road at all. Then we got back on the road and then we were taken off the road and they switched our night and it just everything started to kind of feel not good. We saw the writing on the wall. Um, and I mean, listen, I don't know that I could have done it any longer anyway, just for myself. I don't know. I feel like Ron could have done it forever.
He's a
Um,
machine.
but I think he's also really grateful to just have some space now. So no, it was not a surprise. And I had already, knowing that that was coming, had already been, you know, I had a relationship in the Bay Area, thinking, well, maybe that's a move I could make, but I need to have a job. So I'd already, I'd been having conversations with the people in San Jose.
And when that came to an end, did it feel like a breakup or the death of something beautiful? I mean, 8 years is a long time, whether
Mm.
it's a job or a relationship.
Oh, I felt so much grief, so much grief. Unexpected. I mean,
Hmm.
because even though I expected the end, I didn't expect the grief part. Yeah, and I honestly felt really, I felt like we went out with a whimper and we deserved more. I feel like people just found out that we were canceled. There was no, Rogers didn't send out a press release or a thank you. And I felt really slighted by that. I think for all the people, and there are hundreds of people, because we were a traveling festival as well. So there were people on the ground, you know, driving trucks and spending 6 months of their lives on the road through rural Saskatchewan in the winter. Like I felt on behalf of Rogers, with Rogers' name, doing meet and greets with politicians. And I felt, and I still feel resentful that there wasn't a just they there wasn't just an acknowledgement. It didn't have to be a thank you, but an acknowledgement of like this group who represented this company in this way for this long. So that pissed me off.
Do
But
you feel like one final celebration episode kind of would have tied it up with a nice bow?
um no, I just the acknowledgement I think would have been enough. Like I think we all kind of knew that last episode. It did go out with a whimper because it was like we were out west. Anyway, it just was a weird show. It was on a Monday and we were on the air at like 3 before kids got out of school. So the whole thing was just kind of messed up. Um, but yeah, and I feel its absence also on the hockey landscape. I like people still will message me and say, hey, like I have this story about this person and who's doing this behind the scenes. I'm like, do you know who I could talk to about it? I'm like, no, nobody's doing those stories. That was us. That's what we did.